What's up, guys? Welcome to today's episode of Torcom Talk. Got a really good guest today, Jon Bullock, the executive director of Redmond Proficiency Academy, RPA, a school that he took from nothing 10 years ago to 900 students. First year 30, now 900. Expansion in buildings, expansion in growing children and students, and making them the best members of society possible. His philosophies on how teaching should be done are fascinating, and I hope it'll inspire a lot of you to care more for education and how it matters for society overall. Even if you are trying to grow a business, what is like kids being educated matter to you? Well, you kind of need them to be on your team, right? So please enjoy this conversation between me and Jon Bullock. But getting into it, RPA, Redmond Proficiency Academy. Why is it great?
Why is RPA great?
I'm saying it's great.
You're saying it's great.
I am literally. My sister teaches there. She touches the lives of so many students in more ways than just being the theater director as she is, and killing it at it. By the way, just won state for the 4th time in a row, going for nationals 4 times. I'll just be disappointed if she doesn't win. I'm just used to it. But I digress on that. It's just like how the little stories I hear from time to time. I don't even have a kid. I don't have a kid, but I don't have a kid that's in it.
Right. But
I hear from her, and I see the fulfillment she has from the type of system. So I'm saying it's great. So you can either disagree with me and say it's not great, but I'm asking why is it great?
Yeah. Well, I often talk about RPA being awesome.
Okay.
And I think it's awesome in large part because of the people that are there, the staff that's there, the teachers there, and then the students and families who choose to be there. When we designed it, the concept was we wanted to build an education system that was unique and that honored the unique nature of every individual. When My first principal job was as an elementary school principal.
Where was that?
It was in Eugene.
Okay.
And one of the things I recall from that was how much parents knew that their child was unique and special, right? And I was a new parent at the time, and it resonated with me, right? Like, this is my baby girl. She's unique and special to this world. And every kid is. Every kid is unique and special. And we need to create systems that honor that in all of us, right? I mean, whether that's in education or in the workforce. I mean, for us to be ultra successful as a society, for us to elevate and grow, we've got to harness the individual strengths that people have and augment those and honor those and celebrate those. So when RPA was in its infancy and we were trying to decide what will this school be about, it's really going to be about honoring the unique nature of each child, providing them the acceleration they need, providing them the extra time they need, providing them the opportunities to seek things in which they're interested in. And as a result, we've created this place that's filled with awesome people. And for me, I think the staff, your sister, you talked about her, she's an amazing theater teacher, and she's an amazing person, and she's done some really cool things in her life. And a great joy for me has been able to hire people who I've been in contact with in my life in various ways. In your sister's case, she was a student of mine when I was a principal. Other people, I've been their coach when they were soccer players or basketball players. Other people I've hired to work for me at different locations at different times. And so I've been able to bring in a collective of people who I know where their heart is. Their heart is in making sure every child's life is a bit richer and a bit better. And I think that's what makes it awesome.
That's fascinating. So when you're going about like collecting these people to create the culture of RPA, which is like more and more, the more I learn about, the more special it is, which then of course the culture of your staff that transcends into the students, right? It can't not. Like if your staff hates what they're doing, everything like that, they're going to, in one way or another, the students are going to catch on to that, and that's just going to be a culture of the students as well.
Right.
But that's not what's going on. And so you're mentioning like you're finding these people that you coach or principals of, and that's how you're pulling them in. What are you looking for? What's your overall like ethical code or moral compass that you're looking for within a person that you have known What makes you go, I don't know, not really them,
Right.
or yeah, you do fit this culture?
So I think as I think about it, there's probably three things. First and foremost, in the way that I know them, in the core of their being, do they love children?
Mm-hmm.
Are they committed to working with children? I think that's a fundamental thing about educators. Nearly every educator I've met loves kids. And what I'm looking for when I recruit people is, what does that love of kids look like? How does that resonate out into the rest of the world, right? But do they have a sincere love of working with kids? Which means you've got to love all the hard parts too, right? Like we're working with adolescents, and adolescence is a time where you make mistakes.
Of course.
You're practicing to be an adult, and so we have to accept that they're going to make mistakes and they're going to screw things up, and that's okay. That's part of that process, and you have to love that. Another thing I look for in people I recruit and people I know is, have they been excellent at something? Is there something in their life that they've done to a level of excellence that will allow them to translate that to other people, right? And maybe they're an All-American cross-country runner, or maybe they were a professional actor, or maybe they were a professional musician, or maybe they do something that is so unique and so weird that they have to be good at it to do it. And that goes to that part of the culture where we're telling kids, you get to be who you are. And here you're surrounded by people who have done really unique and awesome things, whether it's doing a field study in a rainforest and spending time learning in the field and doing something you're passionate about, or whether it's as an artist. There's just so many ways that I look for somebody that that has some excellence.
So when you're bringing them in, you're finding excellence, and then what happens? I'm sure you've had instances when you bring them in and it's not what you thought it was,
right?
And it's not the person. How do you deal with that?
So as an employer, what I have always held on to as a hiring practice is, I want this to be awesome,
right?
Or I want it to be
over
a terrible disaster, right? I want to hire people who are either going to be absolutely awesome, or it's going to be a disaster, right? I don't want somebody in the middle. I'm not looking for somebody that's going to be.
Makes it easy. I actually like that philosophy. Yeah. Hey, we're either going to kill it and we're all stars, or this is very obvious that you need to go.
Yeah.
Or quit.
And exactly. Yeah. And not because they're not a great person or great to do, but it's not the right fit. I want somebody who's going to either break the record or fail.
Yeah. And horribly.
And that's okay, because failure is a part of this process. And I think, sometimes in education, and I'm certain in other industries as well, we end up hiring for safety, right? In the sense that, like, well, this person will be pretty good at this.
Yeah, you need warm bodies, right?
Yeah. And I want people who are going to be great at it. And greatness means failure. Everybody I know, anybody I've ever, studied or tried to follow, will tell you stories of how they've failed miserably.
Yeah.
And from that failure, you get great knowledge, right? And so I'm going to take a risk on somebody who might be great, but they might also be terrible. And I've had both, right? I've been fortunate. More often than not, they end up being great, but I've had some just tremendous failures in that process.
So it sounds like no CNB players.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Like DNF, obviously that's out, but it's that middle ground you're talking about, that where many employers can just get caught in a, like, yeah, it's good, it's not great, I'm thinking about cutting it, but they kind of do their job, but they're kind of rubbing the culture the wrong way, and they just let it continue to go. And guess what that person most of the time is thinking? I don't know if I should be here, this isn't really right. And so they're bringing the culture down, and then you're bringing yourself down for having them there. They're not really happy being there, but yet it continues to happen. I'm guilty of this. I've had it happen 2 or 3 times, because I'm just like, I'm somebody that's like, we can turn this around.
Yeah.
I think we could turn this around. And unfortunately, I've only been right on that when it happens to certain people, like once out of like 10 times over the course of the 6 years we've been in business. So maybe I'm not right on it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think part of it is, how do we help people find the best fit for them? Because ultimately, if we're, as employers, if we're in the business of trying to help people achieve success, I want that success to be wherever it is best for them, right? There are people that have come to work for us that their place where they're going to be the best is somewhere else. And so let's help you get to that somewhere else, because you're going to be more satisfied. You're going to be happier. You're going to be more productive. You're going to be better for the students you're working with. And then that's better for everybody. Mm-hmm. And I think if we take an approach that says, how do we get people in the place where they can be the most successful, then that hiring, retaining, recruiting, firing process takes a different slant.
Do you think that transcends into the students as well?
I think it can. I think we ask a lot of students to that end, right, to make a choice and stick with it in a time where they're not certain about most anything, right? And so
a lot of adults aren't either.
Yeah, right. And so when we students get to choose to come to RPA, and so in that choice process, they have some ownership, which probably compels them to be a bit more committed to it.
Have you seen that? I've never thought of that before. That's interesting.
I think it's benefited a lot of our local schools, because by having choice, then they have a choice to not attend there, right? So if I'm a student and I choose RPA, well, then clearly I've made a choice. Mm-hmm. But if I don't choose RPA,
it's like they have stake in it. They have stake in the decision.
Yeah, and choice is a big deal.
Forced,
yeah, choice is a big deal for kids.
I was actually talking about this with somebody on education yesterday. I think I was talking to Preston about it, but when I am forced to read a book, I don't really enjoy it, and a lot of times I don't even do it. So I'm thinking of back in, I was in a public school with Great Gatsby, all that sort of stuff. To be honest, I didn't read it. I saw the movie. I found a way out of it. I got the cliff notes. I did whatever. It wasn't what I wanted to do, and all the literature that was forced on me, I didn't. If I did actually read the book, boy, was I not fully engaged, and I was just doing it to get through the notions and get through the book report and be done with it. Mm-hmm. As opposed to when I want to read books now, specifically when I got and still am so involved in different philosophical books for over the past year and a half, I am just glued. I am reading so fast and marking stuff up, and there's no teacher telling me. There's nobody telling. I'm like, this is incredible knowledge that I'm getting, and it's fascinating. And I was thinking, why is that? Why is it that I'm doing this now and I'm reading on this philosophy stuff they would like me to read back in high school, but here I am so engaged in it as opposed to then I wasn't. And I guess I just went on a tangent because you were talking about choice. I was like, it was my choice. I wanted to.
Yeah, I think choice has a big deal to do it. When we want to learn something, when we want to engage, we're more likely to engage, and we're more likely to engage deeply. Mm-hmm. To hear you talk about Great Gatsby, I think that your public admission that you maybe didn't read it is probably shared by millions and millions of adults who, in their junior year of high school, did not read the assigned Great Gatsby. And so I think that when students have some ownership, they're going to be more engaged. The other thing that we believe in that is that if students can learn something, right? If they're engaged in something that they can learn deeply, then that's easier to transition to the next thing, right? I mean, because one of the things I think is amazing that I've learned over my 25 years working with in public schools is that students tend to have a very thin knowledge of things, and by no fault of their own, they're students. That's what it is. And so even if it's something as simple as in their mind of it must be easy to own a food cart, right? That'd be cool. It'd be easy to do. But to not know anything about the regulations or the bookkeeping or how to manage inventory, I mean, all the things that would go into a food cart,
of course,
right? But if we teach them, if that's an interest of a kid and we teach them all those things, whatever the next thing they want to learn is, they go into it understanding that, there's a whole lot to this. There's a whole lot to this that I don't understand, and that makes people want to learn it, right? And I think it's that way in any sort of trade or any sort of industry where there's a whole lot more than what you see. Mm-hmm. And if we can get students to dive deep into something, diving deep into the next thing becomes easier and they own it more.
Why is it that you think that our education as a whole is, in my opinion, well below subpar? I mean, not in RPA, I mean America. Uh-huh. I mean, we rank in the late mid 20s if we're lucky in most categories, and we're supposed to be number one, right?
Right.
Why do you think that is?
Well, I first don't think it's that way. I think we've successfully built a narrative that says it's that way.
Really?
Without taking into account the various variables that go into some of those international measurements. And so, for example, we have to ask ourselves first, what is the purpose of the American education system? What are we trying to do, right? And so public high school wasn't really a thing until 1940s, right? And then it was designed to help students prepare for essentially, how do I get a job in, prepared to be in an employed field. And over time, it's changed dramatically. But one of the things that's held true as we've evolved from the 40s, right, is that we've developed beliefs that every student should have access to education. Every student can learn. Every student deserves the right to learn. I mean, we've matured over time as a system to say that this is for every child. We still have a ways to go on that. I mean, if you look at the gaps between various subgroups, subgroup populations, that there's gaps, there's achievement gaps, but we've moved towards this idea that it's for everybody. That's different, radically different than some of the international systems we compare to.
Okay.
Right? Some international systems we compare to, they're only students that are engaged in what we call high school are the top percentage of their students' population.
And they only report on them?
Those other students aren't in a high school system. Maybe they went to a trade school, or maybe they're done with their education. And so we're trying to educate all, and not all systems are designed to educate all. So that's one piece of it. Without calling out this country, that country, exactly how they work, it's people can look into that. But we're not always necessarily measuring same against same. The other thing that the American education system does that is unique is that we try to provide students with what I call a jack of all trades education, right? A little bit of everything. We're not gonna be an expert in anything. We're gonna be able to do anything. I think that's a struggle for us. I think it's created some of what what you've described, right, as a potential failure. Because when we think about in athletics, or when we think about people who are successful in other industries, being great at one thing allows you the possibility of having greater success than being pretty good at lots of things. Right. I had a soccer coach one time who saw me trying to kick the ball with my left foot on a goal kick, and he told me, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm working on my left foot." He said, "If you're kicking the ball with your left foot, we're in trouble. Use your good foot," right? I mean, your left leg is for standing on. And his point was, and this is a guy that played in the Premier League in England, is that he was the best at one thing. He wasn't good at lots of things. He was the best at one thing. And in that time, he led the Premier League for half a season in assists because he was the best at that one thing. Our education system is not rooted in kids being the best at one thing. It's rooted in kids having exposure to lots of things, and every student having every possible opportunity beyond high school, right? So we prepare students for every possibility. And you see that sometimes in the debate that's going on right now around, should all students go to college, or should we have more students doing career education, technology, CET? And I don't think the answer is simply one size fits all. We need to do one of everything. For some kids, this high school should absolutely be getting you ready to go to university. And for other kids, it absolutely should be getting you ready to work in a career field. And the way the American education system, the American high school system is currently set up, it's a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Everybody gets the same thing. And at the end, we all get a diploma. And so there's millions and millions and millions of kids getting diplomas this year. Each diploma basically says the same thing: you met the requirements for graduation, but none of them tell the true story of the path that student took to get there. And it doesn't necessarily mean what everybody thinks it means going forward for them.
What do you think? What would be your utopian type of education system? More than that, utopian type of way of a child being brought up from, not from when they're 5, but from when they're born to when they are then on their own and they're out of the nest, so to speak. So I guess
Wow.
18.
Wow,
I know it's a lot.
That's a big question. I think
Start when you're born.
Yeah, so start when you're born. I think my experience as a parent and
The reason I
as
ask
an
that is in
educator.
our country we have these issues with like maternity leave,
Right,
right? Like we don't take it seriously,
right.
and I think that's fucked up. But sorry for swearing, but I do. I think it's pretty screwed up that we think that way. But anyway, I digress. That's why I asked from birth, like, what do you see as your utopian society? How would that work?
Well, I think one of the things that strikes me this is that what I see happening in our culture right now, and even locally, is that we have a disconnect between what we say we want to have happen and what we're willing to put forth to make that happen. And that disconnect causes us to make wide and varied policy decisions that have unintended consequences that we don't consider, right? I mean, I hear people all the time talk about, like, for example, the state of Oregon right now is on this promotional campaign for student attendance, right? Because we believe that students attending school is a good thing. I mean, I'm not oppositional to that. I think students should attend school. But talking to high school kids about the need to attend school is a deeper issue than that child at 16 choosing to go to school or not to go to school that day. It's more deeply rooted in what have we built as a community so that student can get to school and can be prepared to go to school and has what they need in order to be successful. We sometimes have a bootstrap philosophy, right, that says if you work hard enough, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, you can make it. And if somebody doesn't, we assume that it's their fault.
A work ethic.
Yeah. And while I think, yes, there are times where people fail to take advantage or fail to execute on the opportunities that exist in front of them. But I also think it fails to take into account, if we want all students to have a great education, then we have to be willing to invest in the things that we know help them get a great education. And some of those things include ensuring that their parents have, or their caretakers have jobs and health care and food, right? So that a child can be successful. And that means we have to make policy decisions that might be the antithesis of what our personal belief might be about, right? I mean, we can't want this output, but we don't want to do the inputs that get us to the output, right? I mean, and that's what I see in education sometimes is we want in the past nearly 30 years, 35 years, Oregon has had some very robust school reform efforts, right? And really sincere and really, I think, in some cases, quality ideas.
Like, what are some that you've really liked?
Well, for example, if you go far enough back to House Bill 3565 and the evolution of SIM and CAM. SIM was a Certificate of Initial Mastery. CAM was intended to be the Certificate of Advanced Mastery. And one of the things we do in education better than everybody else is that when we get a reform, we name it so then we can later kill it, right? So, educators that are listening to this are probably like, SIM and CAM, that thing was terrible. Well, its execution may have been, right? And particularly in some localities, it may have been poorly executed. The idea behind it, though, was that every student would demonstrate a series of skills, an initial mastery that would allow them then to move on to an area where they could choose to demonstrate advanced mastery, right? The idea being a student's going to demonstrate their proficiency. And then once they do that, they're going to move on.
Okay.
Well, I hear all the time from people out in the community across the state and sometimes across the country about how social promotion is the downfall of education, right? This idea that kids just get passed along without the skills. Well, we had a system that was going to say you don't move on until you get this thing, right? But it meant to do that, we had to change the inputs. We had to change the way we educated and delivered education.
What were the inputs mostly changed to?
Well, it changed to things that, like, you might need a year to learn algebra.
Yeah.
I might need 3 years to learn algebra.
Yeah.
And both of those things are okay. But we have...
Well, that's true, right? Like, as I teach myself, like, going back to the philosophy stuff that I'm going down, I'll go through, like last night I was reading Tao Te Ching, and as I was reading it, I was just like, okay, that was pretty profound, but I don't really get it. I'm gonna read it again. Still not really. I'm gonna look it up on the internet and see what other people have interpreted what Lao was meaning on this. Oh, okay, now I get that, and now I get these other things. So while somebody else could be like, oh yeah, I get that the first time through, it took me 3 times and a lookup on that specific, I think it's passage 11 or whatever. Right. And I'm able to do that because I'm doing it on my own, right? I don't have anybody doing WIP. So I completely agree with you. Like if I take 1 year to do algebra, and if you take 3 months, then
or
that's
3
what
years.
I need. Or 3 years, yeah. But that's what I need. But I will get it. And if you can learn on the way that I do, if you can make it connect the way that a person learns, because everybody's learning style is different as well.
Right.
Some people are really good with audible learning, and visual learning is another one that's really big. Another one's just on reading it and like what connection happens. Like with audiobooks, if I listen to them, I'm hearing it, it's happening, but nowhere near as much as if I'm bringing it through. That's with me though. I know that's not with everyone.
Yeah.
So
what's interesting for me, I use audiobooks as a way to consume media when I'm not trying to gain mastery of that media. I'm trying to enjoy it, right?
That's yeah.
And when I am reading, I'm doing that to try and develop an understanding or gain mastery. Mm-hmm. And
audio is also good for like multitasking, right? You're driving and you're listening.
And it's different for different folks, right? But that's the point of it, right? In that no single medium also yields the same result for the same concepts for people, right? Mm-hmm. It was interesting. My daughter had an economics class this past term in college, and in the process of that economics class, she was asking me questions. I was, trying to give her advice and help her and provide. And finally, I found these videos online that explained a concept that we were talking about. And she watched the video. She goes, "Oh, I got it." She goes, "I never knew that I could learn this way." And so now, in some of those classes that she has that maybe aren't of high interest to her or that are more of an academic, she goes and seeks out resources that provide her that audio and visual learning. Mm-hmm. And she said, "I get it now." And this is she's been a pretty good student. She's been a student. She's in college now, and she's now just learning that, right?
Yeah,
that's how it works for her.
Yeah, and my question to you about the utopian raising of a child and going and having them educated and basically making a rounded adult is the question I was asking, and it's twofold as to why I'm asking you. One is it's your profession, what you do, but two is you've done it well. Your daughter is. She's not at the adult, or she is at the adult, and whatever you define as adult, she's in college, but damn, is she well-rounded and
thank you.
Oh, of course, but she killed it in what she does best, which is turns out to be acting and singing, which blew my mind when I saw her perform a few times on the pipe she has on her. Wow. And then when it turned out all the grades were going as well as they were too, I was just like, well, you did it well personally, and now you're also doing it well on a larger scale, a more macro scale when it comes to RPA. So that's why I'm very interested in what you see as being that way. So we're going down that you see different reforms, and Oregon is pushing them. Inputs change. So is that where you guys had the biggest resistance? Like, okay, if the input has to be somebody takes 3 years in 1 year, we're not set up for that.
Right.
Am I following that right? And that's where it fell apart?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, so thank you for saying nice things about Katie. She's I'm very proud of her, and
as you should be.
I tell people that probably without question my greatest accomplishment is being her dad, and so I think anybody that's a parent, like the hope you have is that your child goes on to be happy, and that you've as a parent you've helped shape that person to be somebody that's good for the world, and so that's what I've always wanted to do, and I'm very proud of her. And as I think about how she's helped shape my thinking about education, is that I often use her in my thinking around what would I want for my daughter, and as somebody who's in the industry, somebody who's engaged and connected, what would I want? And that's what I want for every child, right? Not that I want the same thing as for my daughters, because they each have different needs, but that's the question I want to ask about every child. What do I want for them? What do they deserve as a human being in this process? What do they deserve? And so it's been good for me to have her go through school with me and grow up and be able to ask that question each stage of the way. And so when it comes to the inputs and stuff, there's kind of two parts. One is the inputs around how do we ensure every child that comes to our school, or our schools as a community, comes with just the fundamentals. I mean, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. How, their housing, their clothing, their food, their love and appreciation. How do we ensure those things are met so that they're prepared to be engaged in learning? And those inputs have to change from a community, or a state or a country. We have to think about how we want those inputs. And that's where I said that struggle is sometimes, because there are people that want the outcome but aren't willing to invest in what needs to go in the input to make it happen.
Why do you think that is?
I think it's because people are confused about what they think sometimes. I mean, at my core, I believe that everybody I come into contact with
wants to do good
things.
Yeah.
I just believe that.
The problem is that so many people, it's a nice way of putting this, they truly believe they're doing good, but they have a lot of judgment and they justify the way they think. And when you start justifying that something is good and you go through that motion over and over again, then you've done a lot of mental gymnastics that bring you to a conclusion that what you're doing is good and things good, but really it's only good for you.
Yeah. I think that's part of it. I also think it's possible that we have so much stuff coming at us that people really try to sort things out with simplicity.
So
right?
much stuff, meaning information
overload,
from that
right?
Phone thing.
From all of it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we have access to so much information that I think people really try to simplify it to understand it. And I think that's a natural human processing, right? Like how do I make sense of all this stuff coming at me? And so what happens, I think sometimes people simplify, and in their simplification of it, they own that, but they might think something different, right? And so we see it play out in all sorts of national debates on wedge issues and things of that nature, which we don't need to go into. But the idea being that if I tell people I believe this, right, I am this kind of person, but my actions are different. I don't necessarily spend time reconciling those things, or a person doesn't actually spend time reconciling that. And I think that's where the trouble comes, right? People know what they want to have happen for our children. Sure. But they've been told that if we do this way, it would be bad to spend money on people who waste money, right? Mm-hmm. That, to put it without getting into, all the gory details, right? And so I think some of the times what we have to do is we have to produce the outputs to then have the standing to say, here's what we need to be able to do this on a consistent basis. This is what we need to be able to do this on a basis for sustainability, right? We got to produce the outputs that people want to see and then tell people how we got there. And sometimes when you do that, you can change behaviors and thinking. When I was in an elementary school, as I told you, in Eugene, and it was a high poverty, high need elementary school filled with just wonderful people, wonderful families, but many of them had economic issues that were far beyond what I think a person ought to have. I had students that were literally living in garden sheds, dirt floor garden sheds. 10 to 15% of my student population had a parent incarcerated. 75% of them were eating free lunch. I mean, it was a place where there was a lot of need.
Right.
And so what we did is we turned one of our classrooms into a community room, and we invited in people from DHS. We invited people in from
DHS?
Department of Human Services.
Okay.
We invited people in from various agencies that could provide help to families, so that we became a place where positive things could happen for kids and families. Mm-hmm. In our location, and we started producing results. When I got there, our reading rate was one of the lowest in the district, and 5 years later, it was on par with all the other schools that were doing well. Not because of the fact that we were just teaching reading, but because we were reaching out to the whole family, to the whole child, and saying, here's how we're going to care for you. Then that allowed us to go talk to people, and people were like, how did you get that result? Well, here's what we did. We pushed in a bunch of social services into our building to get people what they needed so their kids could come to school and be well fed and well cared for and ready to learn.
Have you brought that similar ideology to Redmond?
The ideology, yes. The same practice, no. It works different in different places, different grade levels. But for me, that was a real defining moment in my professional career of understanding the need to invest in social services for kids and families if we want them to be well educated. Mm-hmm. We have to provide them the support necessary to get there. And so it permeates everything we do at RPA with regard to students. What we ask the question, what does this student need? What does this family need in order for the student to achieve success? And the other thing that comes with that, though, is that understanding that not every student, not every family is going to accept it, and sometimes they're going to accept it, and it's still not going to change anything.
What do you do when a family doesn't accept help?
Keep offering.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the thing, right? If we're going to if we're going to fundamentally believe that every child not only can learn but deserves to learn, then we're going to put out every day everything we can to help them. And if they don't take it, it's okay. Or if they take it and it doesn't work, it's okay. We're going to show up again tomorrow and we're going to do the same thing. I mean, not the exact same thing, but we're going to offer our help again. We can't give up on kids and families just because at that moment, at that time, it's not right for them. We have to keep putting it out there, which means you have to have a bit of a rugged heart, right? You have to understand that sometimes you're going to be trying your darndest, right, to do your best for a kid or family, and it's not going to work. And you can't take that and see it as failure. You've got to see it as, this is what I do. We put it out there. And I think, by and large, in the public education system, that's what public educators do every day. Mm-hmm. What I've tried to do at RPA is create a system that supports and honors that in the best way I know how for teachers and staff, so that we don't give up on a kid, that we don't give up on a family, that we keep putting it forward for them. And in doing so, we've had some success. We've also had failure, though. Like we don't see what we do as a panacea for public education. Mm-hmm. We see it as a way to augment what is out there and to maybe try innovative things to inform practice. But at the core of it all is this idea that each and every kid not only matters, but we have to make sure they know they matter. And that means doing whatever we can do to help them be successful.
How are you, what are you looking to do for the future, like, of RPA? You guys have done a lot of great things and have quite a great reputation, but you have got to be, being a visionary, see areas of improvement. So where are you looking to take RPA?
Well, we are, we're 10 years old now, and it's a great time to rethink what we do. So much of what we've done has been rooted in the idea of personalization. Right? Okay. The Proficiency Academy was formed on the key pedagogical principles of personalization and proficiency. And so because we've been personalization is messy, right?
I would imagine.
We had 900 kids, and we try and personalize for all 900.
How many kids did you have the first year?
When RPA first opened its doors, 146 kids.
Wow.
In grades 9 through 12, and now we have 900 in grades 6 through 12.
That's great.
Yeah, it's been a fabulous growth, amazing growth. And we've reached a spot where we operate at capacity now. We've operated at capacity now for a couple of years. Mm-hmm. So our growth in numbers is going to diminish. We're not.
How can you end up helping more kids then?
Well, that's probably another part of this.
Yeah,
where I was getting to is that because we personalized, it's messy. And now we've got to figure out, how do we build systems that support personalization, right? So that not everything we do is brand new or a one-off, right? But this is just, in practice, how do we do this? And that doesn't mean creating bureaucracies. It means creating systems that we all can follow to get to the answer. Now that we've got 10 years under our belt of problem solving and getting to answers, some things will be similar, and we'll know how to get there without going through the same struggle. The same struggle we had to get there. So we're focusing a lot right now on building teams amongst our staff and building capacity amongst those teams to manage things that might otherwise have been spread out differently, right? So we're trying to ensure that we have a system to deliver personalization. And the challenge in that's going to be not to let it get bureaucratic. Right, not to say, well, this is the way we do it. You know.
So, what are your alarms for? Oh, that sounds pretty bureaucratic.
When we start telling students no,
Okay.
That's
a good one.
That's an alarm bell that's bureaucratic. Doesn't mean that it is, and doesn't mean we shouldn't tell kids no. But if we're telling a kid no, are we telling them no?
In what context are you thinking? Any context?
I want to take this class. No, you can't. Well, why not? You know, what my question is, why not? There might be a great reason for it, right? I mean, I want to take algebra 2. Awesome. You can't because you haven't demonstrated the skills that are going to let you be successful in there. You ought to take this. Okay, that's a good answer. You can't because you're in 8th grade. Not a good answer.
No.
Right? That's a bureaucratic answer.
Right.
And so anytime somebody says no, to me, that's an alarm bell that says, is this the right answer or is it the bureaucratic answer? Right? And there are times where we tell kids no. We have to tell kids no. It's not yes to everything. But do we have a reason why that is rooted in our philosophy and our foundation? Or are we telling them no because bureaucratically that's an easier answer?
That's fascinating you say it that way you broke down a bureaucratic answer because there's many businesses, including in my own, where can we do X? Well, and for the example you were giving, can somebody take algebra 2? No, they're only in 8th grade. So can we do X? No, because Y is there. Well, if Y is just like, that's just the way we're doing things, and we're just getting into a bureaucratic system. And that happens more and more as not just schools, but as companies or any organization can grow. Right. Oh, that's just the way it was. Well, maybe that shouldn't be the way it was. Maybe we should open up this way of different video marketing or wherever the case may be.
Right.
Just because we think they're too young or we think this content's too new or whatever the case is, it doesn't mean it shouldn't be tried.
Right.
Like, what if this student flourishes? What if this piece of content in our business completely takes off? Well, we wouldn't have even attempted it if we thought the way we were thinking before.
Right.
I think something that a lot of entrepreneurs could take to heart. Like, is your company or your own mindset saying no to something just because you were doing it this other way before? And one thing that I know that all entrepreneurs don't like is the B word. Bureaucracy.
Right.
They hate it.
Right.
And then I'm like, well, you're kind of being a bureaucrat yourself if you're denying stuff just because that's the way you're doing it.
Right.
Nice little segue there. Okay, so right now you're looking on making sure RPA in the future doesn't continue to or at all develop bureaucratic tendencies. Right. What are other things that you're looking to grow on?
We're looking to find ways in which we can help students, even students who are struggling with learning, to accelerate their path to their next step. I think sometimes when...
What's the core? What do you think the core is to like a teacher when they have a student that's not learning? Like how they take that, or how should they take it?
Well,
they keep on trying and they're just not...
Yeah, I think unfortunately sometimes teachers are their own worst critics, right? They think it's all them and they've got to own that, and how do I make it better because it's on me? And one of the things I think is primary in all we do is we've got to build relationships. We've got to build relationships with students
and their families.
Yeah. And students have to know that we care about their success. We don't care about the success. We care about their success, right? Whatever that means for them. And so what we do and what I ask teachers to do, and I think, we don't do it right all the time. We screw it up too, right? Not everything's great. We have our things that get screwed up, but it's to keep showing up, keep letting that student know you care, keep trying new things if you've got them, and have the student know that I'm always going to be here when you're ready to demonstrate this learning. I'm not going anywhere. You can count on me. Mm-hmm. You might not get it right now. You might not want to get it right now. You might have other things that are more important or more interesting or more engaging or things that are more distracting. But I'm going to be here. I'm going to be here today. I'm going to be here tomorrow. I'm going to be here 2 weeks from tomorrow. And I'm ready to learn with you when you're ready to learn. And I think that is fundamental to helping students that are struggling, because it's funny. Not in a previous life, but like in a different part of my life, I coached a lot, and I remember I was working with a coach one time who was a very negative guy, and
Doesn't sound like the best coach.
No, and he would yell at kids that, miss a free throw. Mm-hmm. You've got to make your free throws, right? The old Bill Schonely line, right? You got to make your free throws. And one time a kid came off the court, and this always sticks with me. The kid says to him, "Coach, do you think I don't know I missed?" Right? And it's this idea like kids know when they're not getting it.
Right.
We don't have to remind them that they didn't get it. Mm-hmm. They know. And what we know about most students, the same thing we know about most people. People want to be successful. Mm-hmm. They want to get it right. So we don't help them by telling them, you don't know these 7 things. They know they don't know them, right? They know. Right. Our job is to help them to learn those things. I mean, there's obviously in psychology and positive psychology, there's this realm of stuff we don't know, mm-hmm. which is a different, different bailiwick altogether.
But the best way to get anybody to do anything is through praise.
Yeah. They don't need to know. I mean, yeah, I know I missed the free throw, coach. Mm-hmm. You reminding me doesn't help me make it.
Right. You being all jacked up when I do make it, that's going to really solidify in my mind like what I was doing at that moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
I find that to be so true going into business of just, unfortunately, we live in a corporate society that's mostly driven by fear, oxytocin. Let's have as much as that drip into our team's brains as possible to make them think, oh, I could get fired. Oh, this is all horrible. Oh, you did this wrong. You did that wrong. And to the defense of that system, it's easy to fall into that as a leader or mm-hmm. definitely a manager. It's just like, what? So-and-so screwed up on this for the client? Well, I got to go deal with this right now and tell them about it. What? Now the other so-and-so did? Well, I got to go tell them, oh, now the other person did this and it's separate in that and I just hit them on that. Well, it doesn't matter. They need to learn about that. And then when the good things come in, what I hear, I've heard this unfortunately over beers with too many entrepreneurs where they say, why do I have to, God, it goes around something like this. Working with all these people and you always have to be babysitting that and I'm finding all these things are doing wrong and then I might mention it was like, well, how often you talk to them about, the stuff they do right. It's just like, why do I need to tell them that they're doing their job? That's what I pay them for.
Right.
And they're and I don't want to go down the road, so I'm just like, all right.
Yeah.
But that's what so many people think. Yeah. And unfortunately, I'm sure that's what some teachers and I know some coaches and all sorts of people think. It's like, I need to tell you when you're doing things wrong and when you do things right, that's what you're supposed to do.
Right.
You should know that.
Yeah. I think some of that's rooted in our fight or flight response we all have as humans. I mean, I think we all fall into that sometimes where it's supposed to go that way. And if it doesn't go that way, we're going to react and try and make it go this way because, the fight or flight. And I know for us as an organization, what's been interesting along that lines is when we were first starting out, when we were a startup, everybody every day lived in fear that it wasn't going to work. Mm-hmm. So everybody put in massive amounts of effort, likely unhealthy amounts of effort, right? Okay. I mean, in a startup to try and make it go.
Sure.
And so I like to think of it as that zealotry phase, right? You've got to have zealots. You got to have people that they believe wholeheartedly in this, and they're going to do whatever it takes to make it. And then you get to this spot where then, in my mind, we got to the growth stage where, okay, we're not going to go away tomorrow, but we do need to keep growing in order to get to where we want to be. Mm-hmm. And there was a change in how you manage at that point, right? Because when everybody's afraid it might go away, you don't have to manage too hard, right?
No.
You just have to set the task in front. People are like, we got it.
Yeah.
And then that starts to go away in that growth phase.
Did you see that happen to you when you guys expanded to another building?
No, I didn't. I saw the change when we got to a sustainable number of students.
Okay. Right?
Because probably so we've had we're next year we start our third contract. We've had 2 5-year contracts. Next year we start our third contract will be a 10-year contract. Once we got through that first 5-year contract, there was a solidification like, oh, this is legitimate, right?
Sure.
We're going to make this work. It was about the time we had new building and some things. And then for that next 5 years that we've been in, I've sometimes had this struggle of like, man, this was easier when people are scared. how do I get back to that? How do I get back to people, doing that kind of effort? And then I have to also remember I got to temper that, because that type of effort isn't, you don't need zealots all the time.
No.
In fact, sometimes that's detrimental, because the zealots are going to remind you about how it was, not where we're going. Right. And so I've had to work on my own management style, adjusting to those changes. And now that we've kind of got through the growth phase, we're in what I think of as a sustainability phase. But one of my board members, Jerry Andrus, who's a very wise man, very successful in business, he told me, he said, John, you need to be careful about that phase, because if you're not growing, you're probably dying. And so, you've got to be careful. What's the next big thing we're going to do? And so that's how I'm thinking about our management for the next couple of years, is what's the next big thing we're going to do? How do we prime people to get ready for that next big thing, so that we stay on a trajectory of growth, even though we're trying to sustain? Because our growth isn't going to happen in student numbers now. We've capped out there, but our growth is going to happen on our delivery methodology. It's going to happen on our engagement. It's going to happen on, what can we provide students to get them to their destination more quickly? And so those are the types of things we focus on. And in doing so, you're absolutely correct. Telling people about all the things they're doing right, all the things they're doing well, is really important in that process, because it can get lost.
So what's the next big thing?
Well, in the short term, the next big thing is getting our organization to a spot where we can sustain the personalization through systems, where we can have more people engaged in the decision making around student directions and planning. Beyond that, it may look like a lot of things. It may look like the possibility of opening additional proficiency academies in places. It may look like training existing schools on how to become a proficiency academy. It may look like providing professional development to other entities that want to learn how our system works. We don't have a set thing that I can say this is what we're going to do. We're going to use the next couple of years to sort out what that big next step is, and then we're going to go for it.
Do you have a little feeling like something that you would like to see it go towards? Often as I find myself in the visionary role of being like, this is what I think I like to go towards, but then the company and my people will be like, well, as we've been talking, it turns out that this is it, and I'll get behind it. I'm like, no, that is it, and I can get behind that.
I think one of the things I know from talking to people, educators across the country, is that there's a real desire for everybody to find the one thing that works, right? Yeah. Everybody's always looking for that one thing that works. And what we've discovered is
it's not the case.
Not one thing works. And I think everybody knows that fundamentally. That's not the revolutionary part of it.
Yet we have a system set up for that.
Yeah, so what we want to bring to people, is a method of personalization that allows them to find that one thing for each student, right? And I think that's a possible future for us, is to be able to help existing institutions find that one thing for students that is that student's silver bullet, at least at that point in time, rather than what's going to be the whole thing for everybody. Sure. What we do in proficiency-based education is being called competency-based education most other places now. As I told you how we like to name things and end them. And so, I've been in conversations with some folks at the university level about what competency-based education could look like at a university for students. Because as much as the K-12 system sometimes is seen as bureaucratic, there are university systems that certainly don't pale at all in comparison.
No,
to
definitely
that.
Not. Yeah. So I was also curious on, you also speak a lot, you motivate a lot of people. You're in government on the local level with Redmond, and also the is it principal/president of RPA?
I'm the executive director. So RPA is governed by a nonprofit corporation. So I serve as the executive director of that.
And so you've done coaching, you were principal there. So is there a philosophy, an underlying one that you study, adhere to, or is there a combination of different things? But there's got to be something in there that makes Jon Bullock tick.
Yeah, it's so I think there's two things. One of those things is I grew up in what some would call rural poverty in Southern Oregon, right? I lived in a double-wide trailer.
Southern Oregon, Medford?
Just outside of Roseburg.
Okay.
Right? I grew up in Roseburg, but we lived outside in the country. And man, it was great. My parents, they're incredible people, just filled with love, and just they took such good care of us. I'm really proud of my parents. They turned 70 this year. All four of their kids have college degrees. All four of their kids own houses. All four of their kids have careers. My parents did a great job.
Yeah,
right?
they did.
Because the story of many families in that existence does not have that much coming out of it, right?
No.
And so I'm very proud of what my parents gave us and put forth to us. But I knew what it was like to live in rural poverty. Roseburg was a timber town when I was growing up, and the timber industry changed, and I got to see it become, depressed a bit.
Yeah.
But growing up, I knew that school was a place where I could get rewarded if I excelled, and I could get punished if I didn't. Not from my parents, but from the system, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I was a kid growing up that didn't like school, though, right? I would do everything I could to get out of stuff, particularly in high school, right? I would skip classes. I got kicked out of AP Lit because we were reading Great Expectations, a book I'd already read. And so each day for 5 days, I brought a different version. One time it was Cliff Notes. One time it was a Donald Duck flip book. Another time it was a comic book. And each day I was sent to the principal's office and finally was asked not to be in an AP Lit any longer. And so what's guided me through education, being an educator, is recognizing that not every kid loves this stuff, right? And I was fortunate to have a supportive family, and I had a couple educators along the way that grabbed me by the back of the neck and were like, "Hey, get it together, go to college." And I went to college. I fell in love with learning in college, and pursued that through my doctoral degree because I loved learning. And so that experience growing up that way taught me about what it means to love learning, and taught me also about that not every kid does love learning. So that's been a core philosophy of mine. The other one, though, strangely came from...
Sounds like it gave you perspective.
It does. I do. I think I have a unique perspective in education from where I sit currently. And it doesn't mean it's the best one. It just means it's mine, and it gives me a lens that maybe some other educators don't have. And I think we have to be aware.
It allows you to relate, though. Like if you're dealing with the Eugene when you're the Eugene principal and you had a kid sleeping on the floor. I mean, you weren't sleeping on a dirt floor, but
right.
you can. It's not too many scales back, and you
right.
can kind of relate. I know that there's a lot of that happening in Redmond and in Bend.
Yeah.
Of similar, if not the same type of stories.
Right.
And so it allows you to be like, okay, I do kind of know what that's like, and this might be what this kid needs. So that's a good perspective that people that grew up in the nice house growing up the whole time and went through like everything was the way it should have been, they don't really understand that. They may not completely come to grasp why that person is living in that situation. They can't really relate to it. So your perspective and the way you can relate to it might give you, or most likely has given you, the great success you've had so far in leading these kids.
Yeah, I think my ability to relate to them has been certainly something that's been promising for me throughout my career. The other thing that happened, interestingly, was when I was just finishing my principal program and just starting my doctoral program, sometime in that, I don't remember the exact year, but we were assigned for a class. We had to read a book and do a group project about it. And man, I was like, this is like, come on, I'm a grown man. I'm in a university program. I'm not doing a book report. What is this about? And so I jumped in with.
Wait, how old were you?
I was already a teacher at the time.
Okay.
I was doing studying to become a principal.
So you do a book report?
Yeah.
It was on The Great Gatsby?
No, no. And so I joined up with a group. And so at this point, right, I'm so earnest. I want to read all these books about educational theory and organizational management, and I'm just furious. We got to read this book. So I joined up with this group, and this group is like, one of the people in the group is like, I just saw this book on Oprah's book club.
Okay.
And it was called Where the Heart Lies by Billy Letts, right? And I'm like, You're joking me. I'm paying graduate school credits to read this and do a book report. And so I was just, I wound myself up over it, right? Mm-hmm. And so it was a Friday night class, all day Saturday class. So Saturday after class, I'm angry. I drive to, at that point there was a Walden book still. I don't think that exists anymore.
Yeah, I don't think so,
right?
Yeah.
And I pick up Where the Heart Lies by Billy Letts, Oprah's book club. And I start reading it, and I can't put the damn thing down. I mean, it's just for whatever reason.
Do you have a hard time in the first few chapters that you were connecting with it?
No, I just was like I was like all in on this thing,
yeah.
And I don't know why.
You didn't care that you were allowed to have your ego sit aside because you were just like, are you serious? Some people would just be like, are you serious? I shouldn't be paying for this. I'm done with this. I guess I'll kind of read it. Yeah, no, and you could be like, no, this is really good. Yeah, but I already said it's not.
Well, so I was of that mindset. I was going in like, I'm going to read this thing sarcastically, and I'm going to make this,
Yeah.
I'm going to make a statement by reading this thing and then telling everybody, how stupid it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I started reading. I'm like,
wow, this is really good.
This is engaging. And I read it, and
this is really good.
And it was about this story about loving one another and about caring for other people. And I'm like, damn, that's good. Mm-hmm. That's good stuff. And to this day, it still sticks with me. I don't have a bookshelf in my office anymore. I've gone to more of a minimalist set. But I know right where that book is because it's a book that I've kept with me ever since then. And I don't know how good a book it is. I mean, I was a literature teacher, and I can't tell you how good a book it actually is. What I know is that book, I read it at the exact right time for me to become the educator I needed to be. I mean, it was just one of those happenstance type things. But for me, those two things, strangely, like my, growing up the way I did, and then reading this book about, that has these themes about love and caring and taking care of one another, they both resonate with me today.
Well, it leads me to the next question. What book have you gifted the most?
So that's a great question. The book I think I've gifted the most, actually, is a book by a gentleman by the name of Ron Mail. I think it's Mail. It's M-E-H-O. He was a pastor of a megachurch in Beaverton, and he passed away from leukemia. And before he passed away, he wrote this book that I believe I got the title right, 10 Good Things About Bad Things.
Okay.
And it is, somebody gave it to me in a very difficult time in my life.
I already like the title.
And I read it, and it's one of those things, if you've gone through a struggle and you've got people that care about you and they try to help you, and sometimes people give you something, you're like, okay, thank you. I know that makes you feel better. I still feel like crap,
Yeah.
But this person gave it to me. Say, if you read it, it's a simple read, right? And so, I would pick it up every now and read it. And I read through it, and it's rooted in Christian philosophy. But his message is not simply about Scripture. It's not simply about believing a certain way. It's this idea that bad stuff's going to happen to people. I mean, and we all think that whatever happened to us is the worst, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, and that's not a bad thing. It's just who we are, right? But when we start to realize that good things are going to come out of this, right? Mm-hmm. I'm gonna learn something about myself. I'm gonna grow in some way. I'm gonna become a better person from this.
Most people end up having their biggest growths when they hit rock bottom.
Yeah. And then when you start to realize, oh yeah, there are people facing stuff way worse than whatever this thing is. And that doesn't minimize what we do, but maybe gives us some empathy towards the idea that, man, I don't know what you're going through. So maybe if I treat you with a little bit of kindness, maybe if I treat you with a little bit of compassion, maybe if I'm willing to listen just a little bit, maybe that helps you. Maybe you're better, and maybe I'm better for it, right? And so I started giving that book out as a gift to people who would run into a struggle like mine, where I'm like, hey, I know what you think, because you know how it is, right? You're going through something terrible, and everybody's like, it's going to be okay, or it's going to be fine, and you're like, it ain't going to be fine. This is going to be the worst thing ever happen, and I'm going to be destroyed. So stop telling me it's going to be fine.
Yeah, I have a book like that as well. It's The Obstacle Is the Way by Ryan Holiday. And when I run into people that are going through really horrible things, either economical bad things or relationship-wise or really anything. It's just a great book by Ryan Holiday that just like the obstacle basically becomes the way, and you might think it's a big boulder in the middle of the road, but if you find a way over it, it's going to lead to just the new chapter of your life.
Yeah.
And stop trying to run from it. Stop trying to create a new road, and learn that this is actually a good thing. And all of a sudden, it changes your perspective of like understanding while you're in the middle of this hell, that it's hell because you think it's hell.
Right.
So if you start by changing just that perspective alone, that this isn't hell, this is actually the beginning of something new. Like if Mazama closed down because, you know, if Facebook all of a sudden stopped, we'd be in some trouble. Maybe I'd be able to pivot in time, but good chance we'd be going out of business.
Right.
And I could just cave and I could just cry and curl up into a fetal position as they tore the sign down and said, "Why me? Why me?"
Right.
But nobody cares. Right?
Right.
No one cares. Some of you might be like, "Oh, it's too bad," but they really don't care. They need to go and do what they need to get done, and that's fine.
Right.
So why pity yourself?
And also that it's okay to spend some of that time curled up crying.
Sure.
Right.
But once you come out of that, or even to go into it being like, they tear the sign down, the way I like to look at it is like, well, looks like I'm going to build that app I've been thinking about for a while.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
What a great opportunity for me to do that. I didn't have enough time to do it before. I'm going to do it now.
I got plenty of time now. Yeah, a dear friend of mine, one of my best friends on the planet, and a guy that's seen me through a lot of stuff. His signature line of his email says, "All true paths lead through mountains." Right, and you know,
That's a great line.
I don't know where that's from.
I don't know. I love it though.
But you know, it's that idea
get it.
that like, yeah, you're on a journey, man, and it's going to be some hard climbing. And I think this is one of the things that
Sometimes you'll be wearing cotton in those mountains, and you almost die.
Right?
And you'll learn from that. And you'll get rid of your cotton clothes.
You'll have no more cotton.
But that's like one of those little failures, right? Like little things in life. Hey, you're wearing cotton, you're climbing these mountains. You're like, oh, you shouldn't have done that. But now you're wearing a bunch of wool, and now you're good, and now you're busting through the mountains.
And you're sorting it out. And
that's why when you're saying failure isn't bad, I was like, I'm like, of course it's not.
Yeah.
Like there's definite things that you learn from that, you become more successful. Not only that, but if you're only successful all the time, and if you don't fail, then how the hell are you gonna? First of all, that doesn't exist. Second, if it did, how do you compare it? How do you even know what success feels like if you've never failed? And third, if your life was a movie, nobody'd watch it.
Right. There's got to be that struggle.
Yeah.
And you know, I think one of the things that I've struggled with sometimes in my own kind of search for a philosophical path to follow or a spiritual path to follow is, you know, sometimes people get, you know, there's been books written about, you know, when bad things happen to good people, right? As if only bad things should happen to bad people, right? if only, right? Or if you're a good person and something bad happens, that's bad, you know?
Yeah.
And,
I don't think there's bad people either. I think you just confuse people.
But I think that we're all people. Like, if you're a human, bad things are going to happen. This is how this works,
Yeah.
and we're going to struggle with those. And there's going to be, you know, crisis moments, and we're going to break sometimes. But the great thing about humanity is we have the capacity to overcome it, and in that overcoming, that's when learning happens. That's when growth happens, and I just, you know, I think about how that's guided my educational philosophy, you know, that, yeah, we're going to screw some things up. You're going to screw some things up. That's not a cause to give up. That's not a cause to quit. It's a cause maybe to shed a few tears. It's a cause maybe to step back and reevaluate, but it's not a cause to give up. And I just think, you know, if we stop ascribing good and bad to people based upon their circumstances, man, we get a lot farther, right? I mean, you know, and I don't mean that, yeah, we know when something's a bad situation, but that person isn't a bad person. Situation sucks, right?
Sure.
And maybe there's some things they could do or not do that would change that. But we've all been in some sort of bad situation where all of us have made choices to make that situation worse, and all of us have made choices to make that situation better. And maybe if we gave each other just a little bit of a break, a little bit of space to make the good and the bad, and then supported one another as we climb out of that or we climb that mountain, man, it'd just be a better place, right? I mean, that's what guides some of what I'm doing.
That and just like looking out for each other. But you're in an industry that does that all the time. The oxytocin that you must feel on a daily basis is I would hope would be high and amazing. I mean, just being able to help a bunch of kids, like we help this person, we help this person deal with this with social services. This person was not learning any rate that was even measurable, and now they're graduating.
Yeah.
And just the feeling of doing good without expecting like really anything in return is what gets that oxytocin going. And you guys are able to have that all the time. The thing is that anybody can have that. It's just pulling over when somebody has a flat tire, even though you think you have somewhere to be on some deadline, or giving an extra hug to somebody that needs it when you thought you don't have the time, or like, oh, this might be a little awkward. Just doing those things that expect nothing in return is that's where the good really comes from.
Yeah,
I think
it's fascinating if you look at social media, as if you don't, but if you look at some of the things that go absolutely viral on social media, it's when somebody does something that is a good deed, mm-hmm. that wasn't necessarily extraordinary, but people see it and they're, oh, that's amazing. Yeah. I want to live like that. I want to be like that. There was
also when they're not sure they're being caught on camera too.
Yeah, I saw one on a Twitter thread the other day about a gal on a subway who was stopped by another young woman who was getting ready to have a seizure, who had her seizure plan laminated and said, "Could you sit with me until the next stop?" and gave her the seizure plan, told her what to do. And this woman said, I'm gonna take you to your stop, not to my stop, right? I'm gonna mm-hmm. stay with you. And then she would ask her, can I help you get to your house, right? And it was just a story about like, here's somebody who's vulnerable, who needs help, who is being proactive, reaching out for help.
Right.
And this person helped him, and it was, I don't know how many, tens of thousands of views it got, or however that, I don't know sure. what the metric works on that, but it's stories like that inspire us on a regular basis. And when I see those, I think that's awesome. And then I think, yeah, we can all do that, right? We can all take that moment and, return the shopping cart to the
Yeah.
shopping cart wrangling thing. Don't just leave it where it is, pick up that piece of trash, help somebody grab some off the shelf. And it's those moments of humanity that make us who we are and give us that feeling that we're doing good in the world. And it's not that hard. And
it's not that hard, but the thing that people get caught up in, I think, or what I used to be, is time.
Yeah.
Right? And we only have so much, and I don't have the time to help this person. I have to do this, and I have to do that. And those things are typically for that person to make more money. And so that's the thing that kind of pulls you in that way. And it sucks. I'm pretty familiar with it. 2 seasons ago for skiing, which I'm an avid skier, I would, and the season before that, and the season before that, and the season before that, when I'd be driving up to the mountain trying to get first chair, and there would be somebody on a powder day, like in a car, or that didn't have much business being up there, but they probably didn't know. I didn't think that at the time. Or when they're in an SUV, but they didn't have traction tires, or they're trying to put on chains and they're halfway in the road and it's causing a huge backup.
Right.
And then we finally get around it. And this is what I'm thinking. I'm like, you're causing me first. And I just keep on driving. So then one of the books that really influenced me a lot is actually that one, Leaders Eat Last by Simon Sinek.
Mm-hmm.
And that one was basically bringing to my knowledge the thing of oxytocin, serotonin, and dopamine and cortisol. These things, these 4 main chemicals in your brain. And the oxytocin one is basically that selfless one. So going from doing that to reading that book, taking it to heart, to the next season, going up and there was somebody that was struggling, they were swerving up the mountain, we were slowed down by it. I'm like, I'm gonna go help them, pull aside, got out, was able to help them get the chains on. They were just like frantic, like, oh, I'm so sorry. And while I was there, I was just like, yeah, no, it's all right, it happens. I was helping them put the chains on. There were people that used to be me driving past, honking, shaking their head. One fucker literally flicked us off.
Yeah.
Wow, and I was just like, they didn't mean to do that. They're like, the girl's in tears as the person's just like honking. They didn't go
Sure.
out and they didn't get in their SUV being like, today I'm going to piss everybody off on the way to Mount Bachelor.
Yeah.
That is not what they thought. And so then I got out and I did that and helped them. And then another person started having the same issue, and I was helping them out. And then I got in a car and I got to the mountain like 15 minutes later than normal, and everything worked out fine.
Right.
And I still had a great day, and I felt great. I felt absolutely fantastic about helping those people, and I do every time. And then I felt absolutely horrible about how I used to be.
Yeah.
And it's a good way of like just looking in the mirror. It's like when you do start doing that good stuff, and you're like, what did you used to do?
Right. And it's okay also, I think, sometimes to give ourselves the permission or the forgiveness of when we don't get it right. That's the other part of that. If we exist in the shame-based culture where, oh, you know what, I should have given that guy $1 when I walked by him today, but I didn't. Okay, I didn't do that day.
At least you start thinking that way.
Yeah.
There's other people that think, no, fuck them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I still don't know that. I still don't.
I know you don't. But I'm saying a lot of society does.
Yeah.
They're like, no, they're just going to spend it on heroin. And that's the argument. Right. And it's done. And it's just like, or the argument of, I don't have to give money to this, or I don't need to give my time because I'm too busy building this, and this is for the greater good. And what is this? It's some banking firm that they're running.
Right. Yeah, I get that. And one of the things I'm always reminded of that is what it means to have a state of privilege in our society, right? I mean, because of, what I do, because, the color of my skin and the fact that I'm a man, I get access to things that other people might not otherwise get access to,
right.
And allows me to behave in ways that privilege exists. And I think it's something we have to be cognizant of when we're doing good deeds, is that some of that is a result of the fact that we have the privilege to do those. Mm-hmm. But the other thing that strikes me about that is that we all have the capacity to do it, and our capacity to help people shouldn't be evaluated by what they do with that help, right? I mean, if I'm going to give you $5 because you need $5, mm-hmm. There's a part of me that just wants to trust you need the $5. I don't know what you're going to do with it.
Yeah.
I mean,
you're not asking me for a budget for that $5.
And maybe I'm naive, and maybe I'm simplistic, maybe I'm Pollyanna. That could be true too. But it's not my job to. If you think you need $5 for that thing, and I have $5 to give, and I'm willing to give it, then I'll give it to you, and you do what you want. And it strikes me. I was at a grocery store not long ago, and checking out, and there was a woman that was in front of me that was paying with an Oregon Trail card, right? And she had. Sure. She had, I don't know, I think it was a Haagen-Dazs bar, right? Like, and a guy behind me is like, wish the state would pay me to eat premium ice cream, type of thing.
Damn it.
And I was just, what struck me is this, right, this idea that like, who knows what this woman is going through? Like, who knows? There's a possibility that Haagen-Dazs bar might be the only piece of joy in her life that day, right? And it's not my job to evaluate her use of the benefit that she's receiving. And I know that there are some people that will hear this and see this, and my guess is there might be a day where a political opponent uses that against me, and that's super fine. But I just don't want to err on the side of judging people for their decision-making in their own lives.
I can just spin that so fast on that asshole by saying, okay, yeah, the state's paying for having a Haagen-Dazs. I bet the company that's paying your check would love you to eat a Haagen-Dazs too. It's not in their best interest. Their health insurance premiums go down if you eat just a celery.
Yeah.
It's better for everybody if you eat just a celery. So, or let's say, but I'm an entrepreneur, I make a home money. I bet your clients would be way more happy if you're eating healthy and not having a Haagen-Dazs bar, because then you'll live longer and be less irritable and be able to do the job better for them.
Right.
I'm sorry, but just because that person needed that, and it's not like she's eating it all the time, and we all are allowed certain pleasures, and to make that kind of comment, what if she overheard that? Now she thinks horribly about just using the EBD card.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it, but people getting these things at the road rage, and I used to be one of them. And I still do it from time to time, and I catch myself, and I'm like, hey, no, why have that anger come out?
Yeah.
How does that help anything? How does that snide remark help you? How does that help the woman? How does that help the system?
Right.
It's just showing that you're an asshole.
Yeah, and it's funny. My daughter gets mad at me sometimes because anytime she confronts a problem, although she used this against me the other day, to her credit. But
she's
when
smart.
when she was younger, when she'd run into a difficulty with somebody, I'd always say, but why do you think that person did that? What are they going through, right? And so
You say that to her.
I would say that to her. Like somebody was mean to her at school
So how'd
when
she
she was
flip that on you?
well, yeah. When somebody's mean to her at school, she come on like, this happened. I'd be like, well, maybe they were having a bad day, or what might be going on in their life. Well, she's away at college now, and something transpired, and I was upset about it, and she was like, well, but maybe that person was having a bad day. Like the person that she had the interaction with, I'm like, okay, you win. You've won the game. But
well, it's good, because you can falter, she can, I can, we all can.
Yeah.
But at least we are working on it.
Yeah.
Right.
And so the pause for me was when I walked out of the store was like, okay, I was upset. I was like that. And it hurt. And then I was upset that I didn't say something to defend this woman, or I didn't buy the bar for her, or I didn't say something to him. I was just like, it was a lot. But when I walked out,
at least you didn't smile and laugh at him and agree and encourage him.
Exactly. But I then got my car
Unless you
driving
did.
home. No, I did not. When I got my car driving home, I was like, what's going on in his life that makes him like what must his struggle be?
There's a great quote from Gary Vaynerchuk.
I don't think
so.
it
He's basically the current social media tycoon, so to speak, out of New York. He has a great guy. You should check him out. And he wants to build this empire of honey, and he has millions of followers across all platforms. And he, instead of getting all upset, which most people do when it comes to negative comments, which is basically the same thing that you experience just in real life. It is a negative comment, a negative YouTube comment, right, on the Haagen-Dazs video, right?
Yeah.
Except it is in real life, which makes it even worse. But people are able to do it much easier through their phones and laptops because they're behind a blue screen, right? Mm-hmm. And so what basically Gary Vaynerchuk says about the whole thing is, man, for somebody to take, he's like, the negative comments, I don't respond to them. I don't let them get to me. I just feel bad for that person, because how bad must their life be to consume my content that I'm putting out there and then have the time to say something bad about it?
Right.
And I was just like, that's because I've had people say some negative stuff about content I put out there, and I look at it and I just remember him saying that, and then I don't go in a tailspin about it. It's like, oh man, that person must be going through some shit, because I never put out there we need to. I never put out hateful things or anything like that. It's all like, I'm looking to help, and then there'll be somebody's like, oh yeah, well you're this and that, or that person doesn't know what they're talking about, or whatever it is. And for a little second there'll be a little flare of anger, and then I think of that Gary quote. I'm like, oh man, that poor person.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah, I think it's true in life, and that was what you're basically just saying.
Right.
So this guy with the bar, he's going through some shit.
Right. Yeah. And there's a part of me that's like, wouldn't it be great if we could have real-time conversations about that? That somebody could put their hand on the guy's shoulder and say, hey, what's going on, man? Like, what do you need?
That'd be interesting.
Like, what do you... And
I think that's a great idea. Can you videotape it?
Yeah, and then it'll go viral. Yeah.
You get punched in
how
the
many
face.
times do I get punched trying to, hey, are you okay? Jeez.
All right, so this has been a great talk. I wanted to ask you, we'll see if I can... Definitely this question. So if you had a billboard for the world to see, what would it say?
I think the easy one would be for it to say, be kind. I'd probably want to add things like be compassionate, be passionate. But at the end of the day, for me, it's about just being kind. Be kind. I mean, when I think about all the stuff we're going through, whether it's in education or whether it's in our state or our country, like so much of it is rooted in, man, wouldn't it be better if we're just kind to one another? And I reflect sometimes about the work I've done. I've been very blessed to end up where I am. I mean, we have this great, it's a multi-million-dollar nonprofit company that provides educational services to kids and families and has had some success doing it. But at the end of the day, right before it goes dark on me, like, was I kind, And people are gonna. I don't want people to remember the stuff I did. I want them to remember that I did it with an effort to be kind to people, right? That's way more important to me. And then, frankly, for all of us, right? When we get to a spot, I mean, when I think about the number of friends I have in my life or the number of people close to me, it's not a big number. I don't think it is for any of us, right? I mean, it's not a big number. And so, does my daughter think I'm a good person? Does she believe in me and she know I love her and support her? Does my girlfriend, does she know I love and support her? And does she think I'm a good person? Do my brothers think that? I mean, that at the end of the day, that's what really is important, right? Mm-hmm. That somebody that I don't know, that's far away, that wants to say they don't like charter schools or they don't like, my stance on social issues. Okay, like you can think that, but be kind to one another, and have the people that are close to you know that you love them, know that, that you're there for them, because that's what's really going to matter. Because someday, hopefully not too far away, I'm going to retire from all this, and I'm going to go try and live another version of my life, and I want to do that in a way that I'm surrounded by people that love me, people care about me, and I want to share that with folks. And so I guess if I had a billboard, it would probably just say "Be kind." I think that's what I'd like it to be about.
I think that's great. When Ken Streeter was on the show on Friday last week, he was on the show for us. This is when we were talking before, and he mentioned how many millionaires, business executives are on their deathbed with nobody around but like the Wall Street Journal or whatever.
Yeah, wow.
So people interviewing them, and their regret is just the money, profit-driven agenda they had, and not caring for other people and not being kind. And it was just full of regret. And they may have died with a bank account that was flush. Yep. But the friends and the people around them were not.
Yeah. And Ken Streeter is one of the best at talking about that. I mean, that guy's amazing.
Yeah.
What a treasure he is, man.
Yeah.
And probably some of the stuff I've said I've learned from him, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I've learned a lot. I've learned from you too. Yeah. And hey, I appreciate you being on the show.
Hey, my pleasure. This is awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Jon.
Yeah, thanks.